Welcome to a series of videos called The Waterfall Journey. And the problem with the emotional pains that we pick up is that nobody sees the wounds. If you break your leg or you cut yourself, people will fuss around you. You'll be cuddled, cuts will be washed, legs will be splintered. You'll be cared for in a special way while those things are healing. With our emotional wounds, that doesn't happen. We're left with them and we take them forward. So let's go on. So the two blocks here at 1 to 2 is the autonomy or the doubt and shame about who we are. As we move on to 3 to 6-year-olds, well, this is a real time of enterprise for a young person. They're full of initiative, they want to do things, they want to make things, they want to explore, and they need a bigger space in order to be. And if their parents and the people who are in charge of them are giving them that extra space, what they are seeing is big people as nurturing. If, on the other hand, things are not good, if they're being punished, if they're not understanding the rules, if they're saying, I must, I should, I've got to do this in order to please people, what they are putting inside is this view that big people are critical. People who are always going to be down on me. And so what happens is that you get a child behaving in a way to try and get attention in order to say, am I all right? There are many programs on the television at the moment about super nannies going in to look after children who are badly behaved. And there was one where there was a 6-year-old boy who was behaving in a dreadful fashion. He would leap down the stairs from the top to the bottom. He would jump round the room on the furniture. He would jump through his father's newspaper. What he was saying was, Dad, I'm here. Will you take some time with me? But nobody did. Till Super Nanny came. Super Nanny came in and she helped the family have a different regime. They had meals together, they talked about school, Dad played football in the evening with them, Mum read a story, and the whole behaviour of this little chap changed. He became not quiet and docile by any means, but he became a normal little boy. They went back 2 months later and he was back to leaping down the stairs and round on the furniture. Not because he'd changed, but because his parents couldn't sustain giving him the time and the care and the interest that he needed. And what he was doing through his behaviour was showing his anger. Well, if you can't do that for me, you watch what I can do. And this is what it means by being an internal saboteur. We actually have behaviours that stop us getting what we really desire. In this time, life was quite hard for me because I'd shut down a lot. Little things in these times, when we've got an idea in our head, you say, I believed I was unlovable. And then you go to school, and if things aren't perfect, you think it's because you're the unlovable one. When we were 6, just about 6, we had to do some knitting and everybody got grey wool and I got blue wool. Well, that proves that I'm different from everybody else. I'm not the same as everybody else. I'm not good enough. And so you begin to build in and take the evidence to actually cement in place the beliefs that you have got. Let's move on. 6 to 12, again, this is a time of great industry. It's a time when, if you're a primary school teacher, you know that you've got a room full of people who are just bursting to find out, to know, to discover, to learn. And this is the time of moving out into our peer groups. And if you've been coming up the left-hand side, this is a time to start establishing relationships with other people, being confident, being able to do things, being at ease with the same age group. If you've been coming up the right-hand side, this is a really difficult time because already you feel inferior. So, for example, in my day, we had to stand when it was rounders and two captains picked teams. Well, if you feel inferior, you're standing in a way that doesn't encourage people to pick you. So very likely you're going to be the last to be picked. Well, that just confirms that I'm inferior to everybody else. So our behaviour begins to confirm these beliefs we have. Very often it's when people are 6 or 7 that they start developing shyness. And shyness is about withdrawing, trying to keep yourself safe because the world out there is too dangerous. It's, I'll just stand over here, quietly here, and then I'm not going to get into a risky place and things to happen. Now, when I was 7, I caught scarlet fever, and in those days that was a dangerous thing. At 10 o'clock at night, I was collected by an ambulance and I was taken off to an isolation hospital. I can still remember the doors shutting on Mum and Dad and me being alone in the ambulance, again alone in the dark, in pain, no parents. It all confirmed what I knew from a 22-month-old baby. I was taken to this isolation hospital which was 40 miles away. We didn't have a car and we didn't have a phone in those days. I was there for 3 weeks, and at the weekends my parents had a very difficult journey to reach there, and we were allowed to stand at a glass window and wait for our parents. And my parents came round the corner and down the pathway towards me, and I threw myself at the glass and started banging on the glass and crying. So they told my parents to turn round and go away. And I didn't see them again till the next weekend when the same thing happened. Again, that's reinforcing. If you show pain, they'll leave you. Big people will leave you. It came to the day that I was going to be discharged, and notification of that was sent by post, but it was sent to the wrong address. So before 8 o'clock, because it was an isolation hospital, I was dressed in my outdoor clothes, I was put in a little room, and I was still there at 11 o'clock at night. What was it just saying to me? I'm not loved, or they'd be here, they'd come and collect me. They don't want me. And it's these things, it's circumstances which can really cement our wrong beliefs into us. Teenage years are bad enough if you've been coming down the left-hand side, if you've had a really sound foundation. If you've been coming down the right-hand side, it's awful because the confusion is just coming into this place of doubt and shame and guilt and inferiority. That's bad enough anyway as a teenager, where you're searching for your identity, for your values about who you are, who you'll be. It's confusing enough. Life becomes quite intolerable. During these years, I was a teenager in the 60s, and so the uniform for the teenagers was miniskirts, and it was all about miniskirts and discos. Well, if you remember, from that experience in the hospital at 22 months, I didn't like my body, and therefore I couldn't wear miniskirts. I needed clothes that covered me up. I like uniforms, I like guides, I like my grammar school uniform, I like uniform to play games in. I couldn't wear miniskirts, which meant that I was unable to make good relationships with my own peer group because I couldn't socialise with them. And so, again, these things come into being. Let's move on. 18 to 40, well, these are years when everybody wants deep relationships, intimacy, a time when relationships are fulfilling, that you're beginning to either have families or make friends which are foundational for the rest of your life. If you're coming down the right-hand side, you still want those things. And this is where we tend to make mistakes. So I married a man who had just broken up with the love of his life. But because he gave me a little bit in the bucket down the well, a little bit of regard, I married him. Even though he said that if the love of his life turned up again, he would leave me immediately and would go off with her. But you see, a little bit of love, a little bit, is better than no love. But he was an interrogator, and he understood how to get inside one's mind and really play on the weaknesses that you had. And one of the things he would do with me was be to put my arm behind my back and push it up and up and up. And he would say, "You say stop." But actually I couldn't say stop, because if you admit to pain, people leave you. And even a little bit of attention, a little bit of love is better than no love. That's why people get into relationships where they are abused and domestic violence, and they don't break out, because a little bit of affection along with the violence is better than no affection. And if you believe you're unlovable, then you feel you don't deserve to be loved. You don't deserve to have a relationship. There isn't anybody for you. There isn't going to be, because nobody would come and have a relationship with you if they understood what you were really like. And thus we make mistakes. We make the wrong choices. And when we are hurt, we tend to become agents of harm in our life. As we go on with Erikson, we see that he says 40 to 60, the years of generativity, of fulfillment, of being part of a bigger picture, of raising children, of being part of the community who are making a difference. The other side is much bleaker. It's about what's happened to me, where are my dreams? You see, those emotional wounds that have happened to us are still inside. The pain we bury those feelings alive. They're down there inside, and they take a lot of energy to keep quiet. It's why in the 50s and 60s, many people come needing counselling because they're depressed, because the strategies they've used to try and get through life, despite their wounds, are beginning to be so exhausting for them, and they haven't got the energy left to keep going, and they become hopeless. One of the interesting things about Erikson is that he thinks at 60 life is just about over, whereas we're quite aware that life is just about starting properly. But the next one that goes above 60, he looks back and says that we should be looking back at a life full of leaving a heritage, a destiny behind, a legacy for those who follow after. If you're coming down the other side, it's a different story altogether. It's a life that can have despair in it. I was divorced from my first husband, and I married his brother, who was an alcoholic, because on one afternoon he was kind to me. And I so needed some kindness and some gentleness that I went from one mistake and repeated exactly the same mistake by marrying the brother. Johnny died in this place, in a place of despair, and there is nothing worse to see than somebody who's got to the end of their life and doesn't see anything in it that has fulfilled them, that they find is hopeless. The good thing to say is that as we look at this slide, you can see the blocks. So if we have had in place the good building blocks, they look like trust and autonomy, initiative, industry, identity, intimacy, generativity, and integrity. On the other side, through mistrust and doubt and guilt and shame and inferiority and confusion and isolation, stagnation and despair, those things, you can see that life, living life with those going on inside you in your inner story, in your thinking and your feeling and choices makes life full of pain and hardship. The good thing is, and this is my testimony, that when I was 47, that's when Jesus came into my life. And what he has done is gone back, and he has reparented me, he's restored me. So though I might once have looked like the tower on the right in all that confusion, now I'm much more settled and sustained, and I have my identity firmly in him. And that's the restoration process that God is after. The big question for all of us is, are we willing to go through the process of dealing with our pain? It's not an easy question. I think it's the question that marks out a disciple. Are you willing to let God deal with what you've come through? Will you let him heal the distortions that you've been through and that have affected you? Will you come through bit by bit? And you see, the great thing is that when you stand in the waterfall, God knows the way to heal. We don't go digging things up. It's about waiting and letting the Holy Spirit bring to you the things that he needs to heal in you. And he knows the right time and the right way and how much. And it's about us trusting him to bring us through. This is on offer because the Father sent Jesus to die. This is part of the fullness of all that Jesus died on the cross to give us. He shed his blood that we might be whole and free. He wants us to choose life. So your question, as the Holy Spirit brings things to the surface, will you let him do it? Will you let him deal with your pain? In the next videos, we're going to look more about this, and we're going to discover a process where we can work with the Holy Spirit, cooperate with him, understand what he's doing as he deals with our pain.